As part of We the People, celebrating 250 years, here's This Day in History. Proudly sponsored by American Family Insurance.
As we count down to America's 250th birthday this summer, we are sharing our We the People series, the people, places, and things of the past that have shaped our country to what it is today. And Charlie, we're heading to the pitch.
Okay, the pitch on this date, April 6th. Back in 2019, forward Madison FC played their first game in franchise history against the Chattanooga Red Wolves SC. Forward Madison was founded back in 2018 and competes in USL League One, the third division of soccer in the United States. Did Tim write this? Forward was the first team based in the Midwest to join the league and is still the only professional soccer team in Wisconsin. In the club's first match, they would lose to Chattanooga by a score of 1-0. They would win their first ever game on April 19th, defeating Orlando City B by a score of 2-1. Forward Madison would finish their inaugural season in the USL in fourth place and make it to the semifinals in the playoffs. This year, Rally Madison FC will become the sister club of Forward Madison FC, competing in the USL W League after starting later this year. That's This Day in History for April 6th.
Very exciting. If people have never been, it's such an affordable ticket. It's so fun to go to Breeze Stevens. They usually have a little petting zoo. The fans are super rowdy.
Good food, big crowds.
Yeah. It's a good spot. And per Tim, season opener, home opener, May 29th, Friday.
May 29th,
so mark
okay.
your calendars.
He'll remind us along the way, so
He'll
I'm not even
probably
going
be
to
there.
put it on my calendar.
Perfect. Yep. There we go.